All right, let me turn my Bluetooth off, and I've got a few minutes, and I want to talk about the PPP loan a little bit. Um, I want to be clear about this. I am not a tax accountant. I am not a lawyer. I am not any of these people, and there are some positives and negatives to that. The negative is that I could be lying to you, and uh, but the truth is no one knows. Not even the people who wrote this stuff really know. So anybody, including myself, who gives you advice cannot guarantee you uh, cannot guarantee you that the information is not going to change. Okay, but the positive of me not being any of these things is I can just tell you what I'm going to do, and I am no different than you. I don't want to take money and then owe it all back, or not owe it all back, and not forgiven and forgiven. And that's kind of what I want to kind of that's what I kind of want to kind of cover through this is it's how to simplify this. Okay, let's simplify what all this stuff is. Okay, because we need to. Okay, we need to. It is this PPP is holding us back, and so let's kind of go through this. So I've prepared a small presentation, more about talking points for myself, but I want to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program, which is forgivable payroll loans. And I want to kind of go over some basic facts without fancy words and fancy calculations, just the basics on this, okay? So let's simplify the fact. But remember, it is incumbent upon you to verify the information that you get from me, from social media, from anyone. It is your signature. It is that you are going to have to pay this money back. Not me for you, for me for myself, but not me for you. So you have to simplify this fact, and so we have to trust but verify. And I want to say this, and I'll repeat this a little bit later, okay? The driver for spending the funds should be made on an economic basis, not based on making an expense forgivable. I want to read that again. The driver for spending the PPP money should be made on an economic basis and not based on making an expense forgivable. Okay, I want you to make sure that you understand that. So many people I've talked to, myself included, oftentimes are focused on how to make this a forgivable loan and not really using logic to utilize this money. Okay, so let's understand that. Let's understand that we should be making sound economic judgments with this money and not being stupid. Okay, it just doesn't make any sense to be stupid. Okay. With the CARES Act, with the Paycheck Protection Program, it's a two-step process. You get the PPP, you spend the PPP. I don't want to focus on getting the PPP. What banks gave it, what banks didn't give it, who's the victim, who's not a victim, I don't care. Okay, facts are facts, what is, okay? I want to focus on, for those of you that get the money, how to spend the money and understanding how to spend the money. That's what I want to focus on in this, okay? And let's start with this. Let's understand, this is not a quote-unquote free loan. It is not a free loan. The owner is responsible for the interest on the loan, and then the owner is responsible for the loan itself. So what do I mean by that? There is a 1% fixed rate on this loan. All payments are deferred for 6 months. So in other words, you don't have to make any payments on this loan for the first 6 months, but interest will accrue during this 6-month deferral. The loan term is 2 years, so it's not a long-term loan. So in other words, if you get the money, it's not forgiven, planned or unplanned, you have a 2-year payback on this loan, okay? There are no prepayment penalties or fees. So that means that you can pay it off as quickly as you want, and there's no fees for doing so. There's no collateral required for this loan. So it's not like they're securing the loan against your home or your building or your practice or any piece of equipment. There's no collateral required, and there's no personal guarantee requirement. Okay, so in other words, it's not a requirement from the SBA that you personally guarantee this loan. So what that really means is if you take this loan out for your business and you did not sign a personal guarantee on it, you don't have to pay it back if you go bankrupt or be responsible for it. But if the money is used for fraudulent purposes, the U.S. government will pursue criminal charges. If the money is used for fraudulent purposes, the U.S. government will pursue criminal charges. And the government typically gets their man or woman. Okay? Just ask Harvard School or whatever the companies are being asked to give back their PPP and quote unquote choosing to give it back, but they're being asked to give it back. Okay? So those are the facts. Okay? So now let's talk about forgiveness, okay? Because so many of us are under the impression that this is a free loan. It's forgivable, and it is. But what it is, what it isn't, and what matters to make it forgivable is what's important. And you got to understand this in some basic, clear, simplified terms, okay? So, the PPP loan forgiveness is prorated. Okay? It's not an all or nothing condition. Okay? So it's not like if you don't spend the money that none of it is forgiven. Okay? So please understand that. It is not an all or nothing condition. The PPP loan forgiveness is prorated based on several factors, okay? So, let's take a look at that. 75, because no money comes without strings, okay? So the government is clearly putting strings on this. And let's make no mistake about this. This loan is not designed to be mainly for the owners of the business. This loan is designed for the workers of the business. And frankly speaking, non-political as I can be, this loan is designed to reduce unemployment numbers. Because at the end of the day, whether the government gives the business this PPP loan or the government pays people through unemployment, it's still spending the money. So understand the real reality behind all of this stuff. But do take advantage of some things. It is a way to maintain loyalty. It is a way to keep people on your payrolls and ready to work. And remember, we are closer to being ready to work than not being ready to work, okay? So the strings attached are this. 75%, that is the minimum to be used for payroll, qualified payroll expenses. And I highlight and underline the word minimum on purpose there, okay? That is the minimum that you have to spend on this, okay? I want to be clear about that, okay? It is the minimum. I'm doing something here, I apologize. The minimum that can be used for payroll expenses. 25% is a maximum to be used for non-payroll expenses in terms of being forgiven. Again, maximum. So in other words, if you utilize more than 25% of your money for non-payroll expenses, only up to 25% of that can be considered forgiven. But the most important aspect of this is that 75% is the minimum that can be used for payroll expenses, okay? So let's look through the 75% the minimum to be used for payroll expenses. Okay, the first and most important thing that I want to go through here is the underlying or overlying scenario here, which is the employee headcount and compensation. Your forgiveness will be reduced if you decrease your full-time employee headcount. So in other words, if your business started with 10 full-time employees and then by June 30th you don't have 10 full-time employees, you will have a prorated, there will be a prorating of the amount that's forgiven. Okay, so you have to maintain your head count. Okay, number one, your forgiveness will be reduced if you decrease salaries and wages by more than 25% for any employee that made less than $100,000 in 2019. So in other words, you can't take somebody that was making $99,999 in 2019 and drop their pay to $50,000. Again, that will reduce your forgiveness if you do something like that. Now, you can take people that were making more than $100,000 and reduce them to $100,000. Okay? You can reduce them to $100,000. Now, you have until June 30th, 2020 to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes made. Okay? So, these changes in headcounts and salary levels can possibly be done during this 8-week payment term, or this 8-week spending term of the PPP. But by June 30th, you have to have regained your headcount and restored salary levels for team members, okay? So do understand that, okay? Now, let's talk what are qualified payroll expenses. Salary, wages, commissions, or tips capped at an annualized rate of $100,000. Okay, so what does that mean? So basically what that means is for any person on your payroll making $100,000 or less, all of their salary, wages, commissions, or tips will count towards your qualified payroll expenses for PPP forgiveness. Those team members that make more than $100,000, their salary, the equivalent of a $100,000 annual salary is what will go towards forgiveness in the PPP. Okay, so I've done some math because I'm Indian. I've done some math for you. Okay, $100,000 is equal to $8,333.33 per month. $100,000 is $1,923.07 per week, or it is $15,384.61 for 8 weeks. And why did I use 8 weeks? Because that is the amount of time that the forgiveness period, the money spent during the forgiveness period, is 8 weeks. So, in other words, if you are the dentist as a W-2 employee on your payroll and you are making more than $100,000, you can pay yourself more than $100,000, but only up to the equivalent of $100,000 will be forgivable. In other words, up to $15,384.61 during that time period will be forgivable for that. So in other words, make your payroll during the PPP 8-week period, make your payroll $100,000. Your pay for each individual person, $15,384.61 for that 8-week period. What else is a qualified payroll expense? Employee benefits, including costs for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave. Not vacation like going on vacation. It is vacation time, sick time, medical leave. All of those things, those costs for paying people for those services for that time is considered a qualified payroll expense. Additionally, allowances for separation or dismissal are also qualified payroll expenses during that time period. Insurance premiums for health, vision, and dental are qualified payroll expenses, and state and local taxes assessed on compensation is a qualified payroll expense. So if you notice, there is something significant missing from this list, and that are your federal taxes. Your employer portion of your federal taxes is not a qualified payroll expense. So please do understand what is a qualified payroll expense during this time period, okay? It is super important to understand that. Now, let's take a look at the 25%, the maximum that can be used for non-payroll expenses, okay? So your qualified non-payroll expenses are mortgage interest, okay? Not the principal on your mortgage, the interest only. So in other words, if you own your building, the mortgage interest is a qualified non-payroll expense for that 25%, not the principal, okay? That does nowhere in this have I read, and I'm, by the way, I'll show you guys where I'm reading all this from and digesting this information. It doesn't seem to include equipment loans. It doesn't seem to include any of that, okay? Mortgage interest, okay? And also qualified expense are rent, not CAM, not common area maintenance, okay? So typically for those of you that have signed a lease, your lease has two components. There is a rental rate and a common area maintenance rate, okay? The rent, not the CAM, the common area portion of it, is a qualified non-payroll expense. And then also your utilities. That is gas, electricity, phone service, internet, things along those lines are qualified non-payroll expenses, okay? Loans, leases, and utilities have to have been in place prior to February the 15th, 2020. So in other words, you can't go and suddenly sign up for a $5,000 internet plan as a way to fraud the government or your bank out of money. You can't suddenly charge yourself $20 million in rent as a way to fraud the government, okay? All of these utilities, mortgages, rents have to have been in place prior to the February the 15th of 2020, okay? So don't screw with the government, okay? It is not a good idea, okay? Now, understand that this loan is being backed by the Small Business Administration, being serviced and provided to you by your bank. Your bank will make the decision along with the SBA under their guidelines. In other words, if they want the money from the SBA, they have to follow the SBA rules. But the banks will make a decision on forgiveness of the loan, how much can be forgiven, okay? So they're going to require documentation. So what I am doing and what I suggest is that all your PPP money go into a separate bank account and that you write expenses from that bank account so that way it's very easy to document and very easy to track what expenses were made. And if you're using a payroll software, you can run your reports during that time period so that you can see what part of your payroll are qualified payroll expenses. So that's there, okay? So you're going to have to provide documentation for you to get any forgiveness. Okay, so I want to come back to this. The driver for spending the funds should be made on an economic basis, not based on making the expense forgivable, okay? Don't make decisions and frivolously waste or spend money in an attempt to make something forgiven when there's no guarantee that any part of it is forgiven or that the rules may change or not change. I think we have some pretty good guidelines on what can be forgiven, But when you make stupid decisions or you try to game the system, you're risking putting yourself in criminal issue, and you're also risking making portions of your loan that you thought were forgivable not forgivable. Okay, so when you go into this, understand and expect not all will be forgivable. Okay, so plan on a portion of the PPP money not being forgiven. It's not a bad thing to end up with money that is not forgiven. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second. It is not a bad thing to end up with money that is not forgiven. Spend only what you need to spend. Okay? This is not a license to waste money. I want to be clear about that. This is not a license to waste money. What do you do with leftover money? So in other words, you get PPP money, you don't spend all of it. You can't spend all of it on payroll because team members don't want to come back or business is not there the way you expected. You can't spend that much on rent and all of that. What do you do with the leftover money? Give it back. In other words, use the money you didn't spend to pay off the loan. Okay, because what you do spend on payroll, because remember, it's not all or nothing. What you do spend on payroll will be forgiven. What you do spend on qualified non-payroll expenses will be forgiven. And if you didn't spend the money, you have the money. And then you can literally just give it back to your bank. Use it to pay off your loan, minus those things that are forgiven. And that should take care of it. Okay? Or you can use it as a low interest loan. You may actually need it because we don't know what things are going to look like coming back. And we can control payroll overhead. We can control so many of those things. But I'm telling you this, and I want people to understand this from me, okay? I want people to understand this. What causes companies to go bankrupt in this environment is not going to be employee cost. It is going to be not having enough money to pay your obligations for your loans and or your personal expenses. The PPP loan can be that. It can be the loan that tied you over for baseline expenses to maintain your business at a very low interest rate of 1%. But remember, it does have a 2-year term, okay? So again, don't be in a hurry to spend it, okay? Don't feel like you've got to spend it, okay? And if you don't feel like that if you don't spend 75% on payroll, that none of it is forgiven. That is not true. It is prorated, okay? So do understand some of those things. This is not what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that this is going to teach people or make it even worse that people don't know how to handle their money. You're going to get some money and you're going to waste it on stupid stuff and you're going to get in even deeper trouble because of this, okay? You're better off not taking the money in that scenario, okay? So we need to understand. I want the mentality to be that this is not free money. This is the money somebody is lending you that you have to spend a certain way with certain conditions or you got to pay it back, okay? So what you do with the leftover money is give it back, pay it off, okay? So remember, the PPP loan forgiveness is prorated, okay? It's not that you have to spend it all or you have to spend all of it or you get none of it forgiven. It is prorated, okay? So let's take a look at a real life example. Let's look at some facts in a scenario, okay? So here's a real life example. So the loan amount approved was $240,600. It was approved and distributed on April the 13th, 2020. The 8 weeks would be June the 8th, 2020. So that means you have to spend and document the money between April the 13th, 2020 and June the 8th, 2020. That is the period. Any money you spend on June 9th doesn't count. Any money that you spend on April the 12th doesn't count. You have to spend the money between these days and you have to provide documentation for it, okay? Based on $240,600, the minimum payroll 75% is $180,000 and $180,450, and the maximum non-payroll is $60,150. The interest on this money for 2 years will be, and this calculation is a little bit rough because it's not exact, okay? Will be roughly $5,000. So the cost of borrowing this money for 2 years is $5,000. Now, I estimate that most of us are going to end up borrowing this money for 4 to 6 months. And here's where I get that from. Roughly 8 weeks that we have to spend the money, and then the banks have to make a decision in 60 days about forgiveness. Okay, so in other words, there's a 4-month minimum there, and it's probably a little bit of time for documentation, getting things together. So let's call it 6 months. You, the taker of the loan, will be responsible for this 6-month interest. Nowhere have I read that the interest on this loan is forgiven. So you'll have a $1,203 cost of taking this loan for 6 months of 1% interest. Okay. Now let's take a look a little bit closer at these numbers, because when I looked at these numbers, and they happen to be, something I'm very familiar with, the 25% is $60,150. Okay. We do not have rent or utilities that will add up to $60,000 in 8 weeks. We just don't have it. Okay, so I can't spend $60,150 on qualified non-payroll expenses, meaning mortgage and or rent, and we have rent in this particular case, and utilities of $60,000. That's $30,000 a month. It just doesn't exist. Okay, so by that definition, all of my loan will not be forgiven. But I can spend that money, the shortage between the $60,000 and the actual dollar amount, let's call it $20,000. That $40,000, okay, that we're going to have left over from non-qualified payroll expenses, okay, I can add that to what I can spend on payroll, because the payroll is a minimum amount, but the 25% is a maximum amount. So we can spend more than $180,000 on payroll and have it be forgiven. Okay, so in that situation, their possibility exists to have the whole loan forgiven, but I'm going to have to spend more money on payroll than 75%, because there's no way we're going to be able to spend 25% on non-payroll, qualified non-payroll expenses. So I hope this kind of makes sense to people, and I'm going to see if there are questions on this. Yes, so somebody asked, I thought 401k and profit sharing were included in the qualified expenses, so and the qualified payroll expenses. So let me yes, I didn't have that in here. So let me do this. Some people are going to ask, where are you getting the info from? And so let me just show you where the info is coming from. Right here, there's a document from the Treasury Department, treasury.gov, where they have the information sheet for the borrowers of what is included, okay? So if we come down here, what can you use these loans for? Okay, what counts as payroll costs? So let's get a little bit closer there. And what counts as payroll costs? And you can see that right here, okay? And payment of any retirement benefit, okay? So that is all part of the payroll cost there, okay? Vacation time, sick time, medical leave time, blah, blah, blah. All of that is qualified expense for payroll costs. So that is all there, okay? So that is where I am getting the information, and I would encourage you guys to not worry about what other people are telling you, but to focus on what is going on here, okay? So right here, it tells you when you can request forgiveness, what is your interest rate, when do you start paying interest, can I pay my loan earlier? All of these things are here, okay? So all this information is taken directly from the SBA.gov, okay? So I also, for my own happiness, I created a little spreadsheet here of the PPO loan amount, so that way we can figure it out. Okay, so I'll go through another example. I'm late for a meeting, but let's do this. Let's say the bank is going to give you $125,000 for your PPP, okay, and they're going to give it to you. They're going to give it to you on. By the time this all goes through, let's say it's going to be 4/28, 2020. Okay, so here are the facts in your situation. Okay, you're going to get a loan of about $125,000. Your date of origination, I'm assuming, is going to be April the 28th. You have until June the 23rd for all qualified and non-qualified, all qualified forgiveness expenses to be completed and documented. Your minimum, your 75% for your salary is $93,750. Your 25%, the maximum for non-salary expense, non-payroll expenses, is $31,250. So in other words, you need to have rent and or mortgage interest of $15,000 per month, assuming 8 weeks is 2 months, okay? And I know it's not always 2 months. You need to have $15,000 in rent and utilities and or mortgage interest of $15,000 a month to maximize your allowed expenses there, okay? Your potential interest for taking this loan for 2 years, even if you sat on this money and did nothing with it, it would cost you $2,500 in interest, roughly, rough ballpark there, in interest for that. And the expense for the 6 months, the likely length of the loan, is $625, okay? So hopefully this has been helpful information in kind of understanding how this works and what you should do with it. So I want to be clear about this. Stop worrying about whether or not you should get it or not get it. My suggestion is get it. Okay, I firmly believe you should take it. You should not be in a rush to spend any of it. You should make sound economical decisions with that money. So in other words, you may choose to get the money and to never spend any of it, and you will have that money in the bank to use it to pay it off, and then you'll have some interest charges, 1%, okay, and you can just use that money and pay it off, okay. At a minimum, take advantage of that opportunity. Do not take this money and spend it in hopes of it being forgiven. When you spend it wisely and following the rules. Work with your knowledgeable tax professional who actually knows what's going on, and make sure you document everything very well. I want to thank you for tuning in. If you like the information, please listen to our podcast, leave us a review. If you like what we're doing, we do phenomenal training and education at 3D Dentists and with some wonderful people. And if you have questions, you can send them by text, web text. You can actually text the number as well, or you can leave a voicemail at area code 510-698-2663. Okay? So thank you very much. And just again, I cannot stress this enough. Do not foolishly try to spend this money. Do not going into this trying to get it forgiven. Do not. It is not smart. That is not the wise thing to do. Make sound economic judgments. Do a cash flow forecast. See what you need for the next 2 months and the next 6 months, and see where your money is best used, okay? And allow this money to potentially be the net to maintain your business. Don't use the money for foolish personal expenses, okay? That's dumb, okay? And hope you guys enjoy all of this. I'll see you very soon.